All right. Great crowd. Thanks for coming. I'm Joel Achenbach with the Washington Post, which, like the Library of Congress, is one of the sponsors of this event. And I can report that last night I sat on my porch in a beautiful Washington evening and just loved the book you're going to hear about, written by Lynn Sherr, a longtime correspondent for ABC News and for the News Magazine 2020, about Sally Ride. Sally Ride, America's first woman in space. And this book is a barn burner. It has several narrative threads that are utterly captivating. It's not just about an astronaut. Sally Ride was a physicist, PhD physicist in the 1970s, when there weren't a lot of women who were going and getting PhDs in physics. She broke down so many barriers. I have 3 daughters. They're all young women. I want them all to read this book. This book is about someone who had such an extraordinary life. And as a reporter, I also admire it so much, Lynn, because Lynn knew Sally Ride. They were friends. Lynn covered the space program and the shuttle program in the 1980s when Sally Ride made her historic flight in 1983. And they became friends and they knew each other for decades. But Lynn is also just a terrific journalist. And after Dr. Ride unfortunately passed away at an untimely early age, Lynn was brought in by friends and family to write this biography. And what you see is a journalist at work, and it is a terrific piece of journalism because Sally Ride was a historic figure, a public figure, but also a private figure, and she had some secrets, including one very large secret which came out after her death. And it's just a great piece of storytelling, and it gives us a chance to know this extraordinary woman better and appreciate her pioneering life. And I think that you will love this book, and I think you're going to love hearing from Lynn Sherr.
Thank you, Joel. I've been a fan of Joel's work at the Washington Post for many years, and now, of course, I want to marry him. I am thrilled to be here. I love the Library of Congress. I love the Washington Post. I love being in Washington, and I love the fact that there's so many book lovers in this room. So thank you all for coming. And I'm especially thrilled to be here to talk about a woman who really was a true American hero. A woman who made an enormous impact on our world and whose life is exactly the kind of inspiration that so many of us, not just Joel's daughters, but so many of us are craving for inspiration in these troubling times. Sally Ride is a woman whose name is now attached to several schools around the country. Her name is attached to an impact crater on the moon, and to an outer space science venture, and the RV, not the SS, the RV research vessel Sally Ride has just been christened in California, a ship that will ply the waters so that scientists can explore beneath the sea what she was trying to do in outer space. Posthumously, Sally was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Obama. In her lifetime, she played herself in an episode of the TV show Touched by an Angel, and she threw out the first pitch at a World Series game. She was regularly begged to run for office, any office, including taking over the job as NASA administrator. She turned them all down, way too private ever to do such a public thing. And one of her NASA colleagues once asked Sally, "What will it take to get you to take the job as NASA administrator?" And Sally, who spent most of her life in the perfect climate of our West Coast, quipped that she would indeed take the job if they moved it to California. She was also funny and mischievous, and she was indeed my friend. And while her real name was Sally Ride, how does that happen? She was not the inspiration for the rock hit Mustang Sally with its great chorus of Ride, Sally, Ride. In fact, Sally lamented that she ran from that song her entire life. But I have to tell you, of course, it was sung and chanted when she flew for the first time in June of 1983, 31 years ago. And my favorite, I was anchoring the liftoff and the whole mission. My favorite sign down at the Kennedy Space Center was on a bank marquee in Cocoa Beach on the Strip just south of the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Giant marquee. Sally, of course, was flying in a crew of 5, 4 men and Sally. And the marquee read, "Ride, Sally, ride, and you guys can tag along too." More to Sally's liking was being acknowledged by Billy Joel in his song, "We Didn't Light the Fire." Remember that one? That's the one in which he ticked off the names of 56 historic figures and moments over the past 40 years. Sally Ride came between Wheel of Fortune and heavy metal suicide. The song shot to the top of the Billboard 100. Sally heard it for the first time, driving along in her car, and nearly drove off the cliff. So did her friend, her good friend, Billie Jean King, who told me that Billie, would always turn up the volume to catch Sally's name when it's on the radio. I have to tell you, I do the same thing. So why all the tributes and why all the fuss about this extraordinary woman? Let me start with a cartoon. And this is a cartoon that was published right after Sally died. There were a number of editorial cartoons commemorating her life and her death in July of 2012. And the one that I like the best is a teenage girl's bedroom, a surprisingly neat teenage girl's bedroom. And it's bursting with science textbooks and physics and astronomy, and there's a poster of the space shuttle, and there's models of rocket ships all over the place. And the teenage girl with her ponytail is sitting there at her desk looking at her computer, and on the monitor is Sally's obituary. So it says Sally Ride, 1951, 2012, and there's a picture. And the girl's mom is standing behind her. And the girl is talking, the teenage girl, and she's got a look of shock on her face. It's not that Sally died, it's the backstory. And the caption, which is the girl talking to her mom, reads, "Wait, are you saying there was a time when there weren't any women astronauts?" So that's really what this story is about. Of course, there was a time when there weren't any women astronauts. Our glorious space program was a men's club only for the first 25 years. And as a result, women like Sally, who were smart and adventurous, just didn't grow up with astronaut dreams. Sally certainly did not. The job was not available. What Sally cared about was science. She loved science as a kid. She also cared a lot about tennis. She was about 9 years old when her mom put a tennis racket in her hand for the first time. Turned out this incredibly lean and supple and athletic woman was a great tennis player. Wound up with some lessons from a pro named Alice Marble, a very, very well-known, accomplished tennis player. Sally played on the junior women's circuit. She won tournaments all over the country. She actually considered becoming a professional tennis player, dropped out of college after a year and a half to give it a try, and very quickly figured out that the combination of not being what she considered in the top, and also all the practice it required, led her to go right back to science. Later in life, people would say, "What was it that caused you not to be a professional tennis player?" And Sally would always answer, "My forehand." But she pivoted brilliantly. Sally was a great pivoter, would have been a terrific politician, but not interested, and went right back to science. So after she had gone off to she grew up in Southern California, had gone to Swarthmore College outside of Philadelphia for a year and a half, dropped out to try to be a tennis player. When that didn't work out, she went to Stanford, where she would go for would get her undergraduate, her master's, and her PhD, ultimately in astrophysics. In fact, she was in the midst of writing her postgraduate school applications in January of 1977, just finishing up her thesis, when she wandered into the Stanford Student Union